Righty, good morning everyone. All right, that was off to a good start, that was easy. I'm going to talk today about how everyone is getting pwned, and I want to try and give you loads of examples, give you some sort of technical stuff, and regale you with stories of the cyber as well. This will be fun. Now, one of the things that happens when I talk to people about getting pwned is they get a little bit confused about what I mean by the term, and they go, okay, well, what does it mean when I get pwned? And it's funny because often I'm speaking to like the media or like normal non-technical people, and they have not heard this term before. And I have to try and find ways to explain what the word means. And there are many ways of doing this. I have a little clip here of one way of getting pwned, which is quite different to many of the ways we deal with. That is definitely pwned. I often do this talk overseas, and when I go over there, they're all fascinated about Australia. So I say, well, look, when we're in Australia and you get pwned, it actually looks a lot more like this. And they love it, they go nuts. Getting more to the sort of infosec cyber side of things, another way of being pwned would be to be a French journalist talking about how your Twitter account got pwned whilst the passwords for your Twitter account are pasted on the wall behind you. This is also being pwned. Now, a lot of the reason we're using this word and a lot of the things I'm going to talk to you about today are related to this system. Has anyone used Have I Been Pwned before? All right, look at that. Who's been in, say, the Dropbox data breach? LinkedIn data breach? Ashley Madison data breach? Always a guy, every single time. Now, in all seriousness, we know it was basically all guys, and I know that this is not a particularly surprising thing given the nature of the site, but we know it was pretty much all guys because after they got breached and all their data just got spread out over the web, when people analysed where the users signed up from, women had an interestingly high prevalence of signing up from IP address 127.0.0.1. And they're bots, right? They're just manufactured bots that ran in the system to engage with men so that they thought they had a better chance of fulfilling their objective of being on the site in the first place, and they'd pay more money. And the interesting thing about seeing data breaches like this is that when the data breach happens, we start to see all of these internal mechanisms of how things work inside the organisation. Almost like a little bit of a lesson there. Like imagine all of your data was public and all of your decisions and business practices were in the public domain, because this is happening quite a lot. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting is there are some really cool sophisticated security controls. We're going to talk about some of these today. And there's also some really fundamentally basic things that still go wrong. And I thought I'd pick an example, and the penny dropped on me today when I walked in here. There's a lot of CBA people here, right? Oh, shit. So anyway, I got this slide, and I did a talk in London a few months ago, and they said, you know, can you sort of do something that talks about like sophisticated security, but also how some of the really fundamental stuff goes wrong? And one of the interesting things that came out of this whole Banking Royal Commission is CBA had to say, look, we had an incident. We misplaced, lost, not sure exactly what the term was, could not account for some data that was part of a decommission a little while ago, part of a data center decommission. And the way the story was represented, and you guys can tell me if I was right or wrong about this as well, there's a lot of blue shirts for CBA. Anyway, the way the story was presented is I said, look, we were decommissioning a data center and we put the data on the truck to take it for destruction. And I've got some file footage of the truck here. And this is the CBA data on the truck. And they're taking it from the original facility, the original data center, to the secure destruction facility. Now, inevitably, there's a lot of data. There are allegedly about 12 million records. And they're going to take it to the destruction facility and like munch it all up with, you know, the big sort of tape shredders. There was a bit too much data on the truck, and some of it cannot be accounted for. Now, there was literally an honest-to-God statement which said, KPMG, who was engaged to try and investigate what happened, retraced the route of the truck to determine whether they could locate the drives along the route, were unable to find any trace of them. And this is like literally personal data falling off the back of a truck. Maybe allegedly, I know it wasn't proven, but we don't know where it went. So the point is that even though we're doing some really cool, super sophisticated security stuff, at the same time, we still have really, really basic things that go wrong. The number of times I see things like open S3 buckets. Even just yesterday, I tweeted a story, 11 million records found just in an open S3 bucket. Just one little configuration change that went wrong. And as soon as you do that, people find your data. Now, very often, these incidents happen due to the way people create and manage passwords. And I want to spend a bit of time talking about passwords because we've done things the same way for a very long time, we've done them very badly, and things are now changing in a way that most organisations aren't keeping up with. And I like to start with this photo here. So this photo is MIT in the 60s. Now, the significance of this is that this is believed to be the first ever usage of a password on a computer system. Now, we've had passwords as a thing for centuries, but this is the first time they're actually used in any sort of digital capacity. Now, the reason why I think this is interesting is think about the risks that we faced back then with passwords. So who could get your password and use it? Well, first of all, it had to be someone with physical access. So you had to be able to get into the room in order to use the password. Once you got into the room, you had to know what you're doing. It's very different to today. And I reckon if any of us ended up in that room, I don't think we'd really know what to do. I don't know if it's like tapes or punch cards or what it is. So you had to have some level of sophisticated knowledge. The other thing is that there was no password reuse because there was one system. We never had the problem of using it in other places. So you could use like your dog's name or something because you weren't putting it on Facebook or Twitter or whatever else. You could use your birth date, your kids' names. But the mechanism of authentication back then, the idea of having two strings, a username and a password, is fundamentally the same today. It's the same thing. Two things in your head. If you have these two strings and they match when you go to log on, you're in. Now go forward a couple of decades, go forward to like the 80s. So when we get to the 80s, we start getting online systems. And this is a Prestel, it's a very early BBS system. We ended up with about 90,000 people using Prestel. And you could connect remotely from your home and log into the system when you connected. I've got a very short clip here from a story that ran on the BBC back in the 80s that shows you how to authenticate to Prestel. See what you think of this.
The Prestel computer is now asking me to enter my own personal password, which I have now done.
Now, just in case you didn't see this, let's like zoom, enhance, and slow it down. Let's have a look at this guy's password. Right, what's the password? Now, of course, the difference today is you need a minimum of at least 6 characters. So everyone's password is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is a problem, and this is humans trying to circumvent the technology. And you're going to see this as a theme as we go through this password section. It's humans trying to make their life easier because the technology gets in the way. So this is what people do. They create passwords like this, and they use them all over the place. Now, you could kind of get away with it even here because there are only 90,000 people using the system. OK, that's like almost 90,000 more than what it was back in MIT. But the point is that now you've got lots of other adversaries, potential people who want to break into your account around the world. If we go forward another couple of decades, now we're into an internet era. Okay, so now we're into sort of late 90s, noughties, where we're starting to get lots of things online. And we started to say, well, everyone's creating these passwords that are like 1, 2, 3, 4. We have got to try and fix this problem. We've got to make passwords more complex so that people don't do stupid things. So there's some file footage here of Bob in the accounting department, and Bob is trying to sign up to a website which has password complexity requirements. Now, Bob needs a password that's got a lowercase letter, an uppercase letter, a number, and a non-alphanumeric number as well, non-alphanumeric character. It's got to be at least 8 characters long, and it also can't be one that Bob's used in the last 4 password rotations. And Bob's losing his freaking mind because now it is becoming too hard simply to create a password. So what happens when people face these complexity requirements? You've all probably done this, and you've all probably know where it's going. They'll do things like this. This is a good password. Who thinks it's a good password? Because have a think about it. This meets the complexity requirements. Lowercase, uppercase, number, non-alphanumeric, it's also 15 characters long. This meets all the mathematical criteria of what is a good password. But we look at it and go, no, it's a shit password. And it's a shit password because we recognize the pattern, and we as humans know that these are just well-known words and a little bit of character substitution. But you could all go back to your place of work and almost certainly create this password. Now, if you did that, what would happen in 3 months' time? It'll ask you to change it, right? So what are you going to do? You all know what you're going to do. I know what you do. I've seen all your passwords. This is what happens. You increment the number at the end. And remember the bit where I said the humans always find their way around the technology. This password is just as bad as the password before, and if you had the password before, you could figure out this one, and you could also figure out the next one, because it's a pattern. And what's happening here is when organizations are saying, you must rotate your password so that the hackers don't get you, we do this. And this is kind of crazy logic, right? Because think about what it means. So this mandated password rotation every 3 months. We're saying a hacker might get your password, but they might be really busy and they've got family commitments and things like this, and then they won't come back to the site for like another 3 months and actually try it. That's not how it works. They get passwords and they go in and they exploit them immediately. So time goes by and we keep rotating them. I used to do this when I was in a corporate job because I did exactly the same thing as all of you. And I actually learned a trick. I could take the number at the end of my password, divide it by 4, and that's how long I've been in the company. Do the maths, it works. So this is not a good way of doing passwords. I think everyone will agree, but we're all forced into this pattern. What's happening now, there's a real sort of groundswell of change, and I'm going to show you a few things related to this, is we're starting to get guidance from organisations like the NCSC. So this is the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK. We have an equivalent in Canberra called the ACSC. And they're putting out guidance like this. Only ask users to change their password on indication of suspicion of compromise. And this is really different to what we've been doing and what we still mostly do today. Now, in fairness, they don't just say, just like get rid of rotation. They then say, do all this other stuff. And I'm going to show you a resource in a moment that helps you with that. Lots of other things about how can we recognize what are normal usage patterns? How can we recognize what is potentially fraudulent activity? Because we can be a lot more sophisticated today than what we could in the 60s when we invented this thing. A big part of the reason why the likes of the NCSC and NIST in the US have been very vocal about the same sort of stuff, big part of the reason why they're saying this is because they know the habits that people fall into when they're forced to rotate passwords regularly. So the numbers is one, okay? Just implementing or incrementing the number at the end. Storing the password in insufficient ways is another. And I'll give you a good example of this. Remember earlier this year, there was that warning that went off in Hawaii. And everyone totally freaked out because all their iPhones are like, yeah, the bombs are coming, and everyone lost their minds, rightly so as well. And it turned out to be a false alarm. So they've gone and interviewed this bloke, and this bloke was in charge of the emergency response centre in Hawaii. And they got this photo of him here, and he's standing in front of his computers. And there's something really alarming on one of these computers down here. They're using Internet Explorer. And they put their password on a post-it note on the screen. It's like double whammy. But this is precisely the sort of thing that happens, right? People fall back to these practices when they're forced into crazy password management processes. One of the interesting questions I ask when I go and visit organisations and I see things like posters on the wall, you know, always use a strong, unique password. And I'll speak to people there and go, well, do they give you a password manager so that you can actually do that? Oh, no, we've got to remember it. So you've got to remember every single password. They've all got to be different and they've all got to be strong. And somehow you're going to be like Rain Man and just figure this out. It doesn't make sense. I'll give you a few resources here because I want to sort of leave you some things that are actionable as well. Last year, I wrote about this, Passwords Evolved, Authentication Guidance for the Modern Era. And this takes the NIST advice and it takes the NCSC advice and also some advice from Microsoft. And one of the things that I found really interesting when I read their guidance is they talk in here about corpuses. Now, what this sentence is saying is that there are certain passwords that you shouldn't let your users use. A good example of this is don't let your users use a password that is the name of your company. And people do this all the time. I see it all the time when I look at data breaches. It's one of the easiest ways I have to verify the data breach. This data breach is allegedly from Acme Core. Are there lots of passwords that are Acme Core? Yes, okay, it's probably from there. They also say you should not allow passwords obtained from previous breach corpuses. And this is kind of interesting because they're saying if there has been a data breach and there's been passwords that have been leaked, you shouldn't now allow people to use those passwords in your systems because they've got a higher risk of account takeover. And think about what that means. Either it's the same person using the same password, in which case their username and password are already out there in the Ashley Madison breach or the Dropbox breach or the LinkedIn breach. Or they have chosen a password which is the same as someone else has chosen because they have dogs with the same name or something, a name like that, which means it's not a very good password. So NIST said this, but they didn't give you a way of finding passwords from previous breach corpuses. So on Have I Been Pwned, I built a little thing. This is Pwned passwords. 517 million unique passwords from different data breaches, real data breaches. I have passwords in there. Your passwords are probably in there. You can download these 517 million passwords and stop people from using them when they log onto your system. Who uses GitHub? Everyone, right? GitHub uses this. They rolled this out just a couple of weeks ago. If you try and change your password on GitHub or log in with a bad password and it's in this corpus, they'll say, hey, Have I Been Pwned has your password. You probably don't want to use it. There's also an API, and this little implementation here shows you how the API works. So if I search for, say, password like this, go bang, what's in there? That password's been seen 50,749 times. You don't want to use that. And in case you're thinking, oh yeah, great, I just put my password in and send it to some rando on the internet running this service, there's a really cool implementation under this, and it's called K-anonymity, something that Cloudflare came up with to help this service work. If I jump into the dev tools and I search again for this, and I look at the path that was actually requested, this is all that's been sent. Now, I just searched for the word password with a capital P and a 0. Yet all that's been sent is these 5 characters. So the way K-anonymity works is we take the password, we SHA-1 hash it, we take the first 5 characters of the SHA-1 hash, and that's what you see there. Now, I can't tell what your password is. If it was hashed, I could possibly crack it and I could see it was somewhere else. But if I've only got those first 5 characters of the hash, I've got absolutely no idea what your password is. And then the way it works is when we look at the response over here, in that response, every SHA-1 hash that begins with that prefix is returned, and it's just the suffix that's returned. And there's normally just under 500 that are returned. There we go, 496. And then after each one of those suffixes, we've got a number, and that's how many times the password's been seen. There's about 5 to 6 million queries of this API per day. And it's everyone from Kogan in Australia uses them through to organisations like EVE Online, the massive multiplayer game. They hit this tens of thousands of times a day using K-anonymity to stop people from reusing passwords. And really, the moral of the story here is we can't use mathematics. We can't say this long and this many random characters or this many sort of password complexity things. We've got to use stuff like that. So that's there, it's available, it's totally free, you can download it all, you can hit the API as much as you want. Okay, so passwords are a big problem. Now, passwords get leaked, and then ultimately what tends to happen is passwords have a value. And it's passwords along with our other personal data, our email addresses, our names, our birth dates. And that data very frequently ends up in places like this. And this brings us to the dark web. Always sounds scary, doesn't it, the dark web? I'm pretty sure that's deliberate. Dark web sells headlines. This is the LinkedIn data being sold on a dark web marketplace called The Real Deal. My data is in there, 167 million records. A sizable chunk of the room here had their data in there as well. So this first popped up a couple of years ago at 5 Bitcoin. which was a lot less then than what it is now. It was about $2,500 it was being sold for. And you can see here it's being sold by a seller called Peace of Mind. 100% positive feedback, good guy. So you could buy from Peace of Mind with confidence. Now, we're going to talk quite a bit about dark marketplaces, dark web marketplaces, because one of the things that's quite fascinating about them is that it looks kind of normal, right? Like it looks like a normal kind of eBay or Craigslist or something like that. It's just a website. Now, I'm going to show you a few examples of some of the not so normal things that they sell on these marketplaces in just a moment. But just to wrap up the piece on LinkedIn, the bloke responsible for that did get picked up recently in the Czech Republic. He's going on a holiday to America for a very long time. Apparently, he was also responsible for Dropbox, both LinkedIn and Dropbox, so not going to work out very well for him at all. Now, the real deal has been shut down, and many of these dark web marketplaces do get shut down after a period of time. Many of you have probably heard of the Silk Road. The Silk Road was sort of the first canonical dark web marketplace. That ran for a while, then got shut down. He's never getting out of jail. And we have others that follow. The real deal was one, Hansa Bay, Alpha Market. These dark web marketplaces pop up. They run for a while. The people that run them think they're invincible, and then they get caught. One of them that's still running is this one. This is Dream Market. And again, sort of going back to the premise of this looking like a very normal online marketplace, it does. I mean, all right, they do sell some different stuff, granted, but for the most part, you know, we've got categories and searches and things like this. You access it via the Tor browser bundle, which is based on Firefox, works just like a normal browser. And then when you get in there, you buy stuff like fake Bulgarian driver's licenses. Actually looks pretty good. I mean, from here, I really don't know what I'm looking at in terms of fake driver's licenses, but you can go on there and buy your driver's license. It's about $93. You've got to pay in Bitcoin, of course. Everything's cryptocurrency these days. One of the things that we most frequently think about with dark web marketplaces is drugs. And I wanted to sort of find something that didn't kind of lower the tone too much, because drugs can be serious stuff. So I found Trump Orange ecstasy tablets. Makes partying great again. And this is a real thing. And a lot of these marketplaces sell Trump ecstasy tablets. Of course, it ships from the Netherlands, ships worldwide, sold by a guy with 4.96 stars out of 5. Good guy also. Some of it does get really nasty. Things like this. Uncut Afghan heroin, British Dragon. Now, British Dragon, if we look at his ratings over here, he's had 1,989 pieces of positive feedback, 9 neutral, and 8 negative. So a rather trustworthy vendor. And the thing is that trust is a very, very important attribute on a dark web marketplace, because it's not like eBay where you go, oh, look, I went and bought a product that wasn't very good, I'm going to make a complaint to the ACCC. You can't do that in a dark web marketplace. So trust and reputation are enormously important. If we follow this guy through, he actually has a forum. And he says, if you go to my forum after you buy my drugs and leave a positive comment, I will give you 10% more heroin on your next purchase. And the point I'm making here is that all the normal sort of marketing financial incentives that we have above board in the normal sort of web apply here as well. He's got lots of positive feedback, this guy. A lot of 5-star ratings. Like this, like don't, but this would be the guy, just saying. Now, the point of all of this is to try and show you where your data sits alongside. Because if I go to the next screen, here's the Adobe data. I'm in there twice, my work account and my personal account. Only $10. Pro tip, Google, and you'll find this in about 5 minutes. And I don't mean find where to buy it, you'll find where to download it, because so many people have copied it and redistributed it, it exists everywhere now. Similar sort of story with something like this, the Zat database. Sold by Drunk Ninja, sounds trustworthy. And our data's sitting there alongside freaking uncut Afghan heroin being traded in this way. And it happens over and over and over again. It still sort of blows my mind that this is out there running almost with impunity. So it's an interesting side of the security story, right? The fact that this is what happens after it all goes wrong. Let's sort of change the focus a bit and look at how we try and stop it from going wrong in the first place. And I thought we'd focus on this for a bit. Who knows what this is? No, it's a handbag. Now, there's actually a story about this. I've been doing a bit of stuff with Mozilla recently. We're baking Have I Been Pwned into Firefox, which is super cool. And they were saying, when we do focus groups, a lot of people actually think the padlock is a handbag. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because you're going to go do your shopping. What do you take with you? There you go. So most of us would think about this. And this made sense up until earlier this month, until Chrome removed it. And we're going to talk a little bit about this, because this is a visual indicator that implies that, or it doesn't just imply, but it proves that HTTPS is in place. Now, for a very long time, we've been telling people, look for the padlock, look for the green secure text. And if you see that, you know the website is safe and you can trust it. I want to show you a short video. This is an advertisement from Barclays Bank. Now, Barclays Bank ran this ad. Started late last year, they got through to early this year, and then their Advertising Standards Authority forced them to take it down. Let's play it and see if you can spot what's wrong with this.
Supercon! Defender of the galaxy, complete with powerful disc cannon and realistic sounding jetpack!
Defender of the... Oh, you know what? I can't do this. It's all rubbish. It's a scam. If you order me, you'll get nothing. Look, in there, you need a padlock when you pay for stuff. If there isn't one, the website could be fake. Oh, look at that.
Defeat online fraudsters this Christmas.
What do you reckon? What's wrong with this? I mean, other than the fact that Chrome no longer says secure. Anyone could buy an SSL certificate. There are two things wrong with that, but you're basically right. And I'll get back to the two things I think that are wrong with that. Anyone can get their hands on a free certificate, which would hopefully be TLS, because we don't do SSL anymore. It's a semantic thing. You know what I mean. I know what you mean. All right, so let's look at this site as an example. Would you trust this site? It's got a handbag. Oh, so you actually read the domain. You're a special kind of user, because most of them don't read the domain. And actually, there's a true story here, and this is part of why Chrome's been making changes, because they know that people either A, don't read the domain, or B, don't understand the domain. But obviously, what you're picking up on is the obfuscation there. And if I remove the obfuscation, it doesn't look so legit anymore. But it kind of looks like Netflix.com, a little bit, enough that once you put it with the branding as well, and you put it with the padlock and the secure text and everything else, this is a very convincing phishing page. And this is a domain-validated certificate. All you need to do is prove you control the domain, and you get a padlock. And this makes phishing a lot easier, because people have been trained, like Barclays' ad suggests, to look for the padlock. And as I said, if you see the padlock, they sort of invert it the other way. They said if you don't see the padlock, it might not be legit. Ergo, if you do see the padlock, then it's legit, right? So we have stuff like this. And one of the big reasons that we have a lot of stuff like this these days is because of these guys. Who uses Let's Encrypt? All right, let's try and make this everyone by next year, because Let's Encrypt is awesome. And they're awesome because they're free, automated, and open. Everyone gets what free means, right? You no longer pay for certificates. If you are paying any money whatsoever for certificates, that includes you guys, CBA, you're doing it wrong, and we'll talk about EV in a moment. Bear with me. It is free, and they work identically to the ones that you pay big bucks for. Automated means that you can build in the process of issuance and renewal such that it happens automatically without thinking about it. And there are loads of companies, including Microsoft on multiple occasions, that have forgotten to renew certificates. You know how in software development and in technology in general, we sort of go, if you have to do something frequently and it's important, you should automate it. This is kind of important, and you do have to do it frequently. Either annually with most certificates or quarterly with Let's Encrypt, because their certificates last for 3 months. It's open, so anyone can integrate it. So there are loads of web service providers out there these days who say, come and get your website, click the button here, and then you will get a Let's Encrypt certificate for free, and we'll renew it automatically. Now, this presents a new problem. And the problem is this. Certificate authorities for the longest time have sold these certificates, and now they're free. So how do you think the certificate authorities feel about this? Maybe not so happy. They're like, we had a good thing going. We'd get $70 a year or something. We'd do it over and over again. And it was awesome because you didn't just buy it once. You had to buy it every single year. And we had this great revenue stream. Now these bastards have come along and they've done the whole thing for free. Not so happy about it. Let me give you an example of why they're not happy. I wrote something last year about EV certs and phishing and things. We're going to talk about EV in a moment. And there was a really interesting tweet down here, this bloke. In fact, we'll jump back up a little bit there. Where was he? Melai, with the last name I'm not going to have a shot at, but Melai was the CEO of Komodo. Now, at the time, he said, look, here is a Netflix phishing site. Do you see the secure logo on the phishing site? And what the commercial CAs have tried to do is discredit Let's Encrypt by issuing certificates to phishing sites. Because they've said, look, you're bad by issuing certificates to phishing sites. The thing is that encryption is morally neutral. Encryption doesn't make any assertions about whether you're a good dude or a bad dude. It's just like, are you a dude who owns the domain? If yes, then you meet the criteria. So he wasn't real happy about that. And you know, the interesting thing here is he sort of put that tweet out, and then down a little bit further, he had another tweet just here. Here's another one, secure one. Of course my data is secure with these phishers, aren't they? Why does this tweet look different to the tweet above? He's deleted it. Why would you delete the tweet? Could it possibly be that the CEO of Komodo pointed to a phishing site that uses a certificate from Komodo? And as Eric Lawrence pointed out just after this, Eric Lawrence is the guy who created Fiddler. He said, when you work at a CA and need a phishing site to make a point, choose one for which a competitor supplied the certificate. Now, let's be honest, this is funny, we're all laughing. The reality of it is that when you look at phishing sites and who's issuing them, Komodo were winning until recently. And incidentally, like, this is kind of like golf, right? You really want a lower score. But Komodo was leading the charge up until sometime last year. And then Let's Encrypt, as they got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're now the world's largest issuing CA by a long way, they now issue more phishing sites because they're a larger organisation. This is just the nature of it. And it's funny because people lose track of the fact that this happens. So if we jump back to here for a second, and we'll move this discussion on a bit. Whose website is this? All right, Apple's. Now, see, thank you for speaking up, because I think everyone else was like, I want to say Apple, but if I say Apple, Troy's going to tell me I'm wrong. So yeah, you're wrong. It's not Apple. This is an IDN homograph, so an internationalized domain name homograph. It is letters that look like they should be Apple, but they're not Apple. And this is Firefox. If I put Chrome here, you see something quite different. And just to show you, like, this is not some sort of magic trick. If I jump over here, here's the example in Chrome, right? Looks like that. If I grab that and we open up Firefox, let's plug it into there. Woohoo, magic, look at that. Isn't that cool? Now, this also speaks to the point I made just before about humans can't look at the address bar and make any sort of rational, informed decision about whether the site is safe, because we would all fall for that. We would all say that that is Apple. So this is a problem, and the way many organisations try to solve the problem, certainly the way the commercial CAs would like you to solve the problem, is they say you should get an EV certificate, an extended validation certificate. Now let me show you how an extended validation certificate works. We'll jump back to here, we'll go over to Komodo. You see something different there to the other sites? So have a look at the name here. We've got Komodo security, yada, yada, yada. If we go back to my blog, all we get now is a padlock. So while we're here, let's just sort of clearly make this point. Chrome 69 shipped earlier this month. In Chrome 69, they removed the secure text, they removed all the green bits, and now you just get a padlock. They did also remove the scheme in the www, and then everyone got very, very upset, so they put it back. But we still have no secure text, and we still have no green. Remember that, because we're going to come back to green things. Now, when you get an extended validation certificate like this, you have to jump through a lot of hurdles to prove who you are. You need a legally registered business entity. You have to be registered in business directories. You have to have phone calls with the CA to to prove who you are, and they will get documents from you. I had one for Have I Been Pwned until yesterday, and I'm going to explain why I don't anymore. And when I got that, I had to have a Skype video call with DigiCert, hold my passport up next to my face, smile, and took a photo of me. Right? Like, prove who you are. Now, the commercial CAs like extended validation certificates because they can still sell them. There is work involved. This is not an automated process. And they will tell you you should get one because if you have one, people will stay on your site longer. They'll buy more stuff. They'll actually check out with that shopping cart, and it stops phishing because a phishing site can't get one of these. Now, let's try an experiment there. This is always fun with an audience. If the position is that in order to let people know that you're authentic, in order for people to trust you, that you should have an EV certificate, then the sites that we know and use, the big important ones, will have EV certificates. Who thinks Facebook has an EV certificate? Oh, come on. No one? You all use Facebook. Who thinks it has a DV certificate? That's like 0 plus 2. All right, so let's try the experiment because this does make sense when you see it. So if we go to Facebook, Facebook has EV, DV rather. So we don't see facebook.com. So if the commercial certificate authorities are saying, look, you should look for EV in order to trust the site, but one of the world's largest websites doesn't do it, doesn't make sense. Now, this is social media though, so what if we go shopping? What about eBay? Who thinks eBay has EV? Okay, so now there are hands going up. Right, let's go here, eBay. Now there's no EV on eBay. Now here's the point, and this is the rhetorical question for the people that put their hands up. EV certificates will only work if you change your behaviour when you don't see it. You thought this had EV. If you go here and see DV, will you leave? No, you won't. Otherwise, you'd never buy anything from eBay because they don't have it. And even today, I had people arguing with me saying, EV is really important because it reduces the risk of phishing, and if you see the thing there in the title, you'll know that it's a legitimate site. And I was like, well, let's say I want to mount a phishing attack. We'll try PayPal, because PayPal does have EV, okay? Whoops, PayPal, like that. All right, PayPal, you'll see has, oh. Well, this took a turn in a way I did not expect, certificates. Isn't that interesting? Why does PayPal no longer have EV? Quick, put out a tweet. Okay, let's do CBA, because I know CBA does. We were looking at them yesterday. It's just that corner of the room, isn't it? cba.com.au. Okay, so CBA has EV. A lot of banks have EV. Now, people would make the argument that if you go here, you'll know that it's CBA and you'll trust it more. But the question I'll put to you is if I stand up a website with a domain that looks very similar to this and I get a DV certificate and I still have the padlock, will CBA customers go there and say, well, I'm not seeing EV, I'm going to leave? No, they won't. And that's the only way EV would work. If people change their behaviour when they didn't see it, and they don't, therefore it doesn't work. There are other reasons why it doesn't work as well. Oop, that's not my slide. Try this one. Which company is this? Stripe. Okay, yes, correct. Very good. What does Stripe do? No, they don't. There is a Stripe that does card transactions. A Stripe. You can have more than one Stripe. In America, every single state can have a different Stripe. And if you have a legal registered business entity and you can meet all the requirements for an EV certificate, you can go and get a certificate too, which is what this guy, Ian Carroll, did. He went and got a certificate for Stripe Inc. because he has a legal registered entity called Stripe Inc. That doesn't mean it's the Stripe Inc. that you guys think it is. So see how this just continually messes with your head? Like you're seeing one thing, but it means something different. And keep in mind as well, we are here because we are all smart technical people and we're aware of basically the way browsers and websites and things work. We are not representative of the masses. So if we don't get this right, what are the chances everyone else will? All right, let's continue the EV thing. So this is an SSL reseller. It is the SSL store. We know that because there's a massive logo that says the SSL store. The URL says the SSL store. I've blanked out the EV name. What's the EV name going to be? The SSL store. No. It's something different. And now I'm confused. More confused than if I just saw a padlock, because I went here thinking I was at the SSL store and the CA said, I have to look for the name, and if I don't see the name, I can't trust it and I should go somewhere else. And now I'm seeing a name that I don't recognize. And this happens because there's a legal entity that owns the SSL store that has a different name, and it's not a name that's recognizable. Because of all this, because of the confusion, because of the problems it causes, we're heading in this direction. This is from the NDC security event on the Gold Coast earlier this year. I ran a workshop, and there were 3 machines in my workshop where Chrome did this, did not show EV. And these people are part of Google's experiment to remove EV because they're seriously looking at getting rid of it altogether. Only a few weeks ago, someone sent me this. At the time, Have I Been Pwned had EV. And they said, hey, Troy, this is interesting. Look, it looks just like DV now. And then here, as part of the experiment, Chrome temporarily shows only the lock icon in the address bar. Your SSL certificate with SSL TLS, certificate with extended validation is still valid. They know it doesn't work. Google knows it doesn't work. So they're testing getting rid of it. This is Safari on iOS 2 days ago. This is Safari on iOS yesterday. See the difference? Because iOS 12 shipped yesterday. And in iOS 12, they've removed it. They don't do like subtle testing like Google and look for community feedback. Apple's just like, screw you dudes, like it's going. That's it. So it's gone. So now you don't see the company name anymore. Now here's the significance of these 3 screens I just showed. If you are telling customers to look for the business name, and they use Safari on iOS, and incidentally, Chrome on iOS does the same thing, they're not going to see it. So what's going to happen to your customers? You can't tell your customers this anymore. This is my blog on Safari on iOS 12. Do you see the difference? I'll go back. What's different? Color, it's green. So you could tell your customers, make sure you look for the green URL. And then one of them goes and uses Chrome, which is probably quite likely. And you don't have green anymore. So there's all of these screwy nuances about what we're telling people to look for in terms of EV. Now, it's worse than this. It's almost dead, but let's just finish it off. Here's a good example. I've got a little video here, which is a promotional piece from Komodo, which is explaining to people why they should have EV. It's a little short clip here. It's part of a larger video. Let's have a look.
Visitors to a site with an EV SSL certificate see their browser address bar turn green whenever they are on a secure or HTTPS page, typically among the most critical during a session. Right at the moment of truth, when they're weighing whether or not to go forward with a transaction, this striking visual indicator, accompanied by information certifying their business name, location, and the certification authority that validated it, is presented, providing needed reassurance to continue.
Right at the moment of truth. Look for the green. Now, this video is something that they're actively still sharing today. It is an old video, but this is still the position they make. And they say, look for the green, and they show Excalibur. Excalibur is an online marketplace. That's their poster child for EV. This is Excalibur today. And just to rub salt in the wounds, let's make sure we can see everything in its glory here. They know it doesn't work. Maybe Komodo cut them a deal or something, or like the CEO got drunk with the CEO of Komodo, or so. Like, I'm struggling to find a good reason why they did it in the first place, but clearly sanity has prevailed. Let's do another one. Someone forwarded me this month. So their certificate was due for renewal, and they got forwarded an email like this. And there's this bit here that says boost online sales with EV, and it talks about mostlydead.com, and it shows the green bar. Incidentally, there's no green bar anymore unless you're in Internet Explorer, and who the hell's on Internet Explorer? So let's have a look at Mostly Dead. Have a closer look. That's encrypt. DV. So even the sites that were the poster child for EV have gone, no, shit just doesn't work. Like we don't need this. We will go back to DV. All the cryptography is the same. The security is the same. You have automated renewal. There's no manual stuff. There's no money involved. There's just no good reasons left other than just simply not knowing what you're doing. Okay, so I think we've sort of beat EV to death about as far as we can, but let me leave you with sort of one final thought on this, and it's this. This is the value proposition of EV. EV depends on you doing something different in the absence of a positive visual indicator. And you won't. You guys won't. And if you won't, the masses out there won't. Now let's change pace, because I want to talk about some IoT stuff, and I want to talk about an incident I was involved in last year, because there's sort of some really interesting things we can learn from this. And I thought maybe a nice sort of transition from like useless security to IoT would be to talk very briefly about this. This is an IoT padlock. You can Bluetooth your phone. It uses a thumbprint reader to unlock it. It has a screw on the outside. There's a guy called the lockpick lawyer, and he gets this sort of stuff and he pulls it apart, and then he does teardowns on how they don't work. And the screw does what you're probably thinking it does. It unlocks the padlock. So he's gone and submitted this to the organisation, said, look, I'd like to, responsible disclosure, etc. Your padlock can kind of be circumvented. And they came back to him and said, well, actually, the padlock is invincible to people who do not have a screwdriver. This is a real thing. And somehow this is just like indicative of the security industry. I was like, this thing works under this circumstance which never happens, which is probably a good segue from EV, actually. Keeping the theme going on connected things, though, I thought I'd talk a little bit about this. Has anyone got a Nissan Leaf? Had a Nissan Leaf. We'll come back to him. So, this is a Nissan Leaf. We don't see many of them in Australia. I believe they do sell them. They have a lot of them in Norway, the home of NDC. And I was in Norway a couple of years ago doing some workshops, and I did one as part of NDC, and one of the guys in my workshop, we do this exercise where you proxy your mobile device through your PC, and then you look at the traffic from the mobile device. So you can actually, it's kind of like the equivalent of going F12 and seeing your dev tools, but you get to see it on a mobile app. And he had one of these cars, and the car comes with a companion app. And one of the things I learned while I was in Norway in January is it's really freaking cold. And it's so cold that they need to use this app to turn the heater on in the car before they get in there. Otherwise, it's too cold. So this bloke was curious. He thought, well, how does my phone know how to talk to my car? How does it identify my car? Is it like a bearer token or something? So he proxied his traffic through Fiddler, and he watched it. And he was looking for the API key. He wanted to know, what is the API key? He discovered that the API key is printed in the windscreen of every car because it's the VIN number. Now this, after we laughed a little bit, was something that we said, okay, we need to prove this is actually a risk. And what we discovered is that the VIN number is a combination of the manufacturer, the country of manufacturer, the plant, the year, and then pretty much the last 5 digits there I've blanked out because this does effectively give you some control over someone else's car. The last 5 digits are enumerable, so you can just keep guessing and finding other cars. So we found another car, and we managed to pull back information about the battery status and the trip history. And we went, okay, this is a good place to stop. We could go through and just start turning on like the aircon and the heater on every single Nissan that was connected. Let's stop there and we'll report it to Nissan. We'll do the right thing. So I reported it to them and I had a phone call with them, and they were very interested at first. And we spoke backwards and forwards. We had a phone call, did a bunch of emails for about a week, and then everything went really quiet, and it's just like they lost interest. And I just kept getting this distinct feeling that this is something that they would rather not talk about for pretty obvious reasons. And then I discovered online, almost a month later, I discovered that other people had found the same vulnerability. And the reason they discovered it is that apparently the app is terrible. And people were saying, the app is so slow to load, it's a pain in the ass, and you've got to click through all the menus and things. All I want to do is turn the heater on. Here's what you do. Go to this URL, change the VIN number to your own, put it in your bookmarks, and while you're all toasty in bed, just go to the bookmark on your phone, job done, heater turns on. There's probably people out here going, well, that shouldn't be a GET request. That's changing state because you just turned the heater on. And I'm reading this going, do you not know what you have found? Because you have just found the secret sauce to turn on the heater on everyone's car. So I went back to NIST and said, look, I'm going to write about this. It's going to be public. You know, do you have anything else to say? They said, please don't. I said, well, do you have anything else to say? And the thing is that whenever I sort of do something like this and it gets media attention, I've got to try and find this right balance where you want it to be impactful enough that it drives change. You want things to actually get better, so you've got to make sure that it gets picked up by the media, but you don't want to sensationalise it. So you've got to find the sweet spot, somewhere in between. And what I discovered is that Scott Helm, who's actually coincidentally down here, Scott Helm is based in the UK, and Scott Helm had a Nissan Leaf. And we tested this whole thing, and it did actually work. So I said, okay, let's do a video. So I went home to the Gold Coast, and I sat near my pool. He's in England, which is why he looks cold and miserable. And I said, okay, look, we'll do this thing where I will control your car from the Gold Coast, and we'll record it. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the clip from the start. So look, what we want to do then is see what I can control from this end. And I guess the first thing is I can see that you've got a big jacket on. It's cold there. Should we look at what we might be able to do with the heater, see if we can bring you up to Australia temps for a little bit? Now, what we did then is I went and hit the URL that turned on his heating. Now, I've not shown this publicly before because when I originally did this, the vulnerability was still there. But this is the full URL. There's a GET request, there's his VIN number. He's since sold the car, so I'm not doxing your car, just to be clear. And this is all you do. You'd hit this, and then once you hit that, you'd get a response back. Status 200, so that's worked okay. Success, it actually leaks his user ID as well, so if you could enumerate through VIN numbers, you could pull user IDs and then get a little bit closer to understanding who the person was that owned it. Now let's have a look at what happens when I hit this, because Scott got a bit of in-car video. And remember, you could do this to anyone's car from anywhere in the world.
Beeping. Oh, there we go. Oh, my heated seats have come on. The air conditioning and the fans have just come on as well. You can see there's a status indicator on the dashboard to show that the car's currently being controlled remotely, which is now blinking. And I'm not sure if you can hear that, but all of the fans have come on full power. It's actually quite loud in here.
And that was it. And an amazing thing happened after I put the blog post out. Nissan suddenly decided it was important. I don't know why. I think it might have been all the journalists who started writing stories about car hacking. And the thing went offline very, very quickly. And to be clear, this was never about controlling the steering or the brakes or anything that would kill someone. But it gets the car hacking headline, so it becomes important. So they took it offline, and it went down for a long time. It was like 6 weeks or something. Norwegians had to get out of bed to turn the heater on in their car. Eventually, they put it back online, and they pushed out a new app, and this is the app. And Scott actually sent me this. He said, have a look at the app. See if you see anything wrong with the app. And I looked at it carefully, and I zoomed in a little bit down the bottom. Anyone see anything unusual for an app that controls a car? Cut and paste from Stack Overflow. So we discovered that as part of their fix, and mind you, this may explain why it took 6 weeks to fix something that should have been simple as well, they cut and pasted code from Stack Overflow. And we actually found the code. We found the Stack Overflow question over here. It's still there today. There it is. Someone had cut and pasted this without realizing what it did, and now it was controlling part of a car. And it was even worse than that. Because what does this word say? What does that word say? So they hadn't even cut and pasted it. Someone had literally retyped this and had no idea what it did. And it's controlling a car. Now, when this happened, not everyone was real happy about it, because some people had to get out of bed to turn their car on. One person got particularly upset with me, and they left this review on the Google Play Store. And he says, thanks to the actions of publication from a rather stupid researcher, Troy Hunt, at least in the UK, has any car wings? Car wings was the name of the app. So basically, he got very upset that I had reported the vulnerability. And I saw this and I wondered how to react, because I was a little bit pissed off, if I'm honest. It's like, look, I actually tried to do the right thing here, and then you're getting upset with me for basically trying to save you guys. And then it reminded me that there are people like this out there who need saving from themselves. So I decided to print it out and frame it and put it on my desk. It's still there today. It's a little reminder. People need help. Because there are all sorts of things in our lives, digital connected things connected to the cyber, that continually go wrong. Which leads me through to one more. Now this is a fun one, and what I would normally say when I start this, I say, look, I'm going to talk about something here. It's in Japanese, I don't know what it says. When I did this talk very recently, someone actually translated some of the next images for me. Now, I can't tell you here what the translation said. You'll see why in a moment. If you want to know, come back and grab me later and I'll tell you. This is a connected toilet. There is such a thing. It's called Elixir Status, and you get your smartphone and you Bluetooth it to the toilet so that you can control features of the toilet. This is Japanese. If you've been to Japan, you'll know why this just fits the mold just perfectly. And I was curious when I saw this, because I went, why would you do this? Like, what is the value proposition of Bluetoothing to your toilet? I mean, let's face it, you have proximity anyway, you know? It's not like you're trying to remotely control something. So I went and pulled down some images from the app to try and understand what it actually did. Now, all of these are real images. You can find them online. They're not adulterated. And as best I can tell, the first image is some form of a splash screen. Oh, come on. The middle image I find particularly fascinating. This is the one I've had translated, but I can't really say what it was on the stage. It is some form of event-driven data. I can say that much. It is legit. It's out there. The image on the right is a music player. And again, I have not modified these images. The music player has the toilet playing. I can't get no satisfaction. Google Elixir Status, you'll find this, trust me. So I saw this pop up a few years ago, and I thought this would make an interesting part of a talk, because I can say to people that as we start to connect things, we're going to have new vulnerabilities, the kind we have never seen before. And not so long ago, Trustwave, the security company, popped up and said, well, we actually found a vulnerability. That vulnerability could allow attackers to cause the unit to unexpectedly activate bidet or air dry functions, causing discomfort or distress, which I think is an absolutely terrifying concept. Thank you. Now, hey, I have a couple of minutes left as well for questions. If anyone would like to ask any questions, possibly not related to the toilet. Are there any questions? Yes?
So, I know several answers. I'm interested in yours. So, EV certificates don't fix phishing. What does?
EV certificates don't fix phishing. What does? User behavior, which we can't fix. I mean, this is sort of part of the problem. We really don't have a good answer baked in the browser, because most of the answers you hear, such as EV, depend on the user behaving differently under a set of circumstances they're not very well equipped to diagnose. So EV definitely doesn't fix it. One of the things that does fix it is getting phishing sites submitted very quickly to the likes of Google Safe Browsing. So have you ever been to a website, you know, accidentally, maybe it was a phish and you've accidentally clicked the link and like the whole screen is red? That fixes phishing. So if we could get that stuff in there earlier on, you'll also find that very often your carrier, I've certainly seen it on Telstra, will flag phishing sites very early. So the sooner we get them flagged, and that depends on people doing things like submitting malicious sites to Google Safe Browsing, the sooner we get that happening, the better. And that works whether there's HTTPS or no HTTPS or anything else. Look, beyond that, the normal user behaviors, also, we've got to condition people the right way. So I did a talk recently where I showed an ANZ email that I had received. And the ANZ email was saying, we've got a new mobile app for your iPhone. We'd like you to download it. And I'm looking at this going, I got an email from a bank saying go and download software. Right. what I'll do is I'll put my finger on the link and I'll hold it there very, very carefully because I don't want to touch it too quickly, otherwise I'll go there. I'll hold it there and I'll see what happens. And it pops up with some really screwy domain marketing kind of link. And I'm like, this is not good at all. But I'll follow it anyway because, hey. So I follow it and then it goes to an Adobe page because it's using Omniture for analytics. And then eventually it does go through to the App Store and it's a legitimate app. But I said to someone at ANZ, it's like, this demonstrates every single negative thing that we tell people to look for in terms of phishing signs. So unfortunately, we're not doing very well as organisations to condition people to do the right thing either. Other questions? How did I know it was a legitimate app? Okay, very good question. So here's how I think I know it's a legitimate app. I closed it and I went to the App Store and I searched for ANZ and I found one from a publisher called ANZ that had lots of ratings. And then I hoped. But, you know, like this is probably the best thing we have at the moment. I mean, honestly, legitimate app stores like the Apple App Store, the Google Play does get a few funky things every now and then, but going to legitimate app stores, you're much better equipped to go to that store, which is curated. Some people get upset and they say, oh, it's a walled garden, which it is to a degree. But you go there and you download the app, you're much better equipped to do that than try and get the URL right and hope you go to the correct website. Anyone else? All right, well, in that case, thank you very much for coming.